Welcome. I'm Jessica Tejan, and this is the Evolving to Exceptional podcast, where we talk about reaching peak performance in our workplaces, homes, and communities so that we can live our best life possible, an exceptional life. I want to welcome back our Evolving to Exceptional listeners to this week's episode. We have Kelly Bosak with us today. She is a chief people officer and has a really interesting diversity of background experiences in a variety of different kind of spaces that she brings to this challenge of people in the workplace. And so today we are going to be talking about the challenges of having true leadership presence and really actively listening and engaging and being present with your people in a way that creates positive performance results and outcomes. But before we get into that, I want to give Kelly a chance to kind of introduce herself, give us a little bit about your background, Kelly, and why it is you do what you do.
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity, Jessica. So I am a facilitator at heart. When I joined the workforce after graduating from college, I was a trainer of all kinds of things. And that set me into my HR journey. I eventually became an HR manager and kept saying yes to opportunities. And let me say, a very heavy male dominated industry where I had to prove myself. And I did that by learning the business along with HR. I learned how to apply what we're trying to work towards in the business to objectives and goals in the HR function. How can I support the business better? And that was a great recipe for me as I continue to get more promotions in the HR function. Before I knew it, I was leading entire HR departments, all of the departments. And that served me well in my career up to this point. I have a very broad experience across several different industries, and HR is HR. It's just understanding the business as you go along to apply it to what you're doing in HR. I found that to be very successful.
Maybe you could tell us a little bit about what are some of the challenges that you're seeing that led to or that are related to this topic we're going to dive into around active listening and how to approach leadership maybe in a different way than leaders have done in the past. What are some of the things that you're seeing that are contributing to the need to actually talk about this topic more?
To me, I think right now in our ever-changing world, I think people, they say they're burnout, but I feel like maybe they're bored and they're not being called upon to become their best self by their leader. Their leader's not pulling out of them what they can become and who they are. And I think leaders need to show up differently. And I think the way they can do that is to really take on a coaching mentality. And a coaching mentality is all about asking more and talking less, listening more, talking less. You're asking questions to probe that person's thoughts and asking deeper questions. Oftentimes, the questions you ask and you get surface level answers, you have to dig deeper. Tell me more about this. Or what if we did it this way? Or what if we did it that way? That provokes more profound thinking of the person you're talking to. And you can oftentimes get to really creative solutions or ways that person can continue to be developed and take away that burnout or that boredom that they're experiencing in their job.
I think it's interesting. I was thinking about this the other day, the difference between kind of intellect and insight. And we often think that what people are missing is information or the knowledge or intellect around something. And more often than not, I find that people know something, but maybe haven't had the internal insight yet or had that activated connection. I always think about it in terms of neural connections where the information wires into their system, right? Of, oh, that makes sense. That's why I need to. Oh, now I get it. When somebody truly has that profound shift, that's an indication of true insight that's going to serve them versus maybe being told or talked at where we're consuming information, but we're not necessarily integrating and digesting that information.
Yes, that is a great point as well, Jessica. And I think As coaches, one of the important skill sets of a coach is active listening. And that is a skill set that has to be practiced every single day. It's an opportunity for you to lean into what's not being said in an environment. So if you're talking one on one with someone and you're getting a feeling from them that maybe they don't quite understand, you have to lean into that, what's not being said, and say, I'm sensing that maybe you're feeling like you don't understand this. Tell me more about that. What points don't you understand, or what can I clarify for you? And not always providing the answer, instead, asking questions to that person to understand what they're thinking. What have they tried? What have they thought about? And they're probably going to solve it for themselves. Like, as leaders, we shouldn't be problem solvers. We should be ones asking questions to help the person solve it for themselves and be there to guide them with those questions so they can solve it. Once you've recognized what's not being said, then you can seek to understand and really lean into curiosity and try to understand what is being communicated, asking more questions, and don't take that surface level answer. Say, tell me more. What do you
Mhm.
think? What would happen if we did it this way? Or have you thought about doing it this way? What would happen if we did it that way? Or what else? What other ways do you think we could do it? What have you thought about? Like, there's
Yeah.
so many ways you can take that.
Why do you think that leaders struggle with this? I've got some theories, but I'm curious of yours. Why do you think that active listening is a challenge or isn't something that maybe we do naturally?
Well, I think the environment has to be right and it has to be psychologically safe. If an environment is not psychologically safe, I don't think leaders feel comfortable taking that risk because they're not quite sure what kind of reaction they'll receive. I think that's number one, is that psychologically safe environments have to be present for this active listening to really take hold and become part of the culture. And that's all trust. Is there trust in the environment and fear of retaliation if I were to speak out against the status quo? So I think that's one thing. And then it's just, leaders have to be good with being comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Mm,
Because when you are recognizing the unsaid, that's uncomfortable. You have to be brave and you have to lean into that if you're going to get anywhere in
yeah.
communication.
And I'm not sure how many leaders are real have really developed the skill sets around. And when I think of active listening, I take it beyond just listening, but like it's really embodied knowing. And so it's the being present in the moment. So that's the first challenge that I see is that when we're busy, we're thinking about a lot of different things, we're focused on different things. Half the time I see leaders not even pay attention. They're like checking email or they're only half listening to begin with. And so if we're not present, then we're not going to be actively listening. We're not going to be actively in tune. But then also being able to be aware enough of what you're sensing, not just in what they're saying, but in how they're saying it, in your own internal intuition, your own internal senses. And I talk about this in terms of the neural networks in our head, heart, and gut intelligences, and that we have these neural connections that are sending us information. And we know this from neuroscience that our hearts and our gut brains are sending us messages that are important and relevant. And I don't know that many leaders have been trained in or developed in how do I listen to those messages. And I don't mean that in like a woo woo kind of sense. I mean that in a very scientific sense of what are the ways in which our body picks up on unconscious information that we want to bring conscious awareness to enhance the conversation that we're having with someone else.
I agree. I think it's often not thought about because it's not a hard skill. These are traditionally soft skills, right? Which are harder for people to adapt and learn. And it's not talked about, honestly. I don't think it's ever talked about. And it's a big piece that's missing, I think, in today's world of leadership. We have to be able to connect those, have the self awareness to feel those messages in our own self, and then also recognizing them in other people. It's all about the nonverbal cues you're getting from someone when you're trying to recognize the unsaid. It's like, how are they saying it? What's their tone of voice? What's their body language? All those things. What's the elephant in the room?
Yeah.
That has to be uncovered. And you have to become comfortable with being uncomfortable in those situations because they are uncomfortable. But when you lean into that, you get so much good information from the person you're talking to when you recognize what's not being said. And you have a clear path of how we're going to move forward. If you're not
Yeah.
recognizing the unsaid, it's difficult to move forward.
And the other thing I think that comes into play here is that if you are uncomfortable feeling your own feelings, are talking about or being aware of your own instinct, your own intuition, your own sensations, then it's really difficult to do that with another person. And so I think, we talk a lot about emotional intelligence and people get trained on how to do it, but the steps of doing emotional intelligence are not the same as being emotionally intelligent. And there's some work that's required to develop that skill set. And so sometimes almost wonder too, there's lots of courses on active listening skills, right? And like, here's the steps or here's the things to do. And sometimes I wonder if that even works because if all I'm doing is showing up and like doing the checklist, but I'm not really in tune and I don't really know how to be present and aware with the other person that's there, it feels like you're checking boxes versus really being present and actively listening with the person.
I agree. To be fully present is key when you're leaning into active listening. It's really key to anything. Like, if you're not giving someone your full attention, you're not going to accomplish anything. So, we as leaders have got to free our minds and stay open to learning something new and have no expectations when we go into meeting with somebody. Eliminate those preconceived thoughts you may have in your mind about this conversation. Go in with an open mind and expecting to learn something new. And if you can start there and catch yourself when you have those preconceived thoughts and be mindful to let it go, and instead lean into curiosity when you're in a conversation with someone so that you can understand the full picture of that person and whatever it is they're trying to tell you.
Well, and I think it gets into both individual and organizational patterns. So, one of the patterns that we develop is I need to be productive. I need to be accomplishing things, achieving things, getting things done. That is what demonstrates my worth, my value, my contributions. Like that is a pattern that we develop. And and if our cultures don't identify conversations as something that is achievement, the something that is of value, that is productive, then when we get into these settings, we can feel like, oh, but I have all these emails I need to get through. And we diminish the importance of those engagements or those encounters because and not consciously, I'm not even saying we're consciously thinking, oh, this isn't as important as the emails I need to get through. But when we feel a discomfort with being present and actively listening and engaged with the person that we're communicating with, it's an opportunity to inquire, what is the source of my discomfort? Why am I uncomfortable with being present and actively listening? What is my pattern that's pulling me away or keeping me from engaging in this way? And whether that's presence, whether that's talking about emotions, whether that's asking questions instead of telling the person what I think about them or telling them what they need to do, whether it's any of those things, what is it that's causing me to not engage in that way?
Yeah, Jessica, I think another great point. It's so critically important that everyone is self reflective. And when you find yourself resisting to be present, you have to inquire and reflect deeper to find out what it is exactly that's causing you to not be present. Like, you have to dig deep within yourself and really figure out what it is and create some new patterns for yourself to be able to get past that fear or however it's showing up for you so that you can lean into the active listening and recognizing the unsaid and leaning into curiosity and conversation. Like, in this world today, we've got to be more human centric than we ever have before. I mean, people are so lonely. And I feel like we've got to be more connected to people. And that's a critical component in today's world as everything around us changes at such a rapid pace. We as leaders have to be more connected to our people now more than ever.
Yeah, and I think we talked about it. You mentioned it being like a soft skill, which I always think is so funny because like emotional intelligence or the ability to connect and relate to other people on a very deep level is incredibly hard. It's actually really difficult. And as a leader, I willingly admit, like, I wanted nothing to do with emotions in the beginning of my career. I wanted to get stuff done and I wanted to focus on my achievements and outcomes and objectives. And I didn't have time for all that stuff. And I didn't want to make time for all that stuff. And the truth was, if I'm really honest, the truth was I didn't really want to make time for that stuff for myself. I didn't really want to feel any of my own feelings, let alone anyone else's. I was definitely one of those leaders. And I'd never been taught. I mean, I went to school for a long time, grad school, law school, like nowhere was I taught the practices of really consciously using my full-bodied intelligence and how to apply that in the context of communication and conversation with other people to create more powerful outcomes and results. And I find it to be profound today the degree to which it changes the nature of a conversation when we show up in our highest, wisest self, when we're operating at our best, when we're really connected in, when we're creative, compassionate, and courageous, and we're present and attuned to the people that we're interacting with, how much more powerful that conversation is and the emergent wisdom outcome results that come out of it. And so rather than it being truly a waste of time, you walk away going, wow, that was really powerful. That was powerful for them. That was powerful for me. And it's going to be really impactful to results. And so I almost want to like test leaders in if the conversations you have don't feel like they're impactful, important, and creating powerful results, you're doing something wrong. We need to rethink how you're having those conversations.
Absolutely. I heard a quote from a speaker one time, and he said, decide how you show up. You never know when someone else might need you to be your best self. And we have to think about that anytime we're walking into an interaction with someone else. How am I showing up in this conversation? Do I have an intention to make this conversation as impactful as possible? And how can I do that for this person? I'm going to show up and make sure that's impactful for them and for me. And if we change our mindset a little bit and really set an intention for how we're going to show up in our meetings, I think that helps our mindset as we go into that meeting to think along the lines of, okay, I'm going to show up. Impact is important to me today. So what questions can I think about now that I can ask to make sure this is impactful for both of us? And it's not like we're spending a lot of time with the emotions. The only time we're talking about emotions is if you're sensing something that someone's not saying. That's when you have to dig in and find out what that is. What are they really feeling right now? If it's someone you know pretty well and you've gotten past, then your emotions may not even be addressed. But if you're sensing something, you have to stop and address it because you cannot move forward if you don't.
And one way I like to think about emotions is to kind of move it out of the realm of something soft or something that we should be able to overcome, let's say, is let's look at emotions as a data point. Because what emotions really are energy in motion in the body. So when we're feeling any type of emotion, it is an energetic release in the body of information trying to tell us something about the situation. And so when we feel that, when we sense that, when that comes up, if we address it, that energy is able to move through and out, and we're able to get back into our highest, wisest self. If it's a negative emotion, right? Like not all emotions are negative, some are positive, and those are worth addressing too. Those are information too, right? And so if you think about it, I come from the process control engineering industrial space, right? We want to use our gauges, our valves, our metrics, our measurements, our regulators. We want to check in on our systems. How are our systems operating? Is it too hot? Is it too cold? Is it the right temperature? Is it the right pressure? We're watching all those things. Guess what? The human body is a system too. And emotions is one of our measurements. It's one of our ways to connect in and say what's going on. And we need to be able to learn about how to use those different system measurements and use them not in a, not look at them as like a soft, touchy feely thing, but look at them as this is data and information.
That's an excellent point. It is a data point. And I like to say we have to acknowledge the emotion and then help that person move past it if they're ready to. What can you do differently next time to address this emotion? How can you move past this? Are you ready to move past this? Let them feel it. Let them get that out, whether it's positive or negative, and make sure they're ready to move on. Because if you move on too quickly, too, the person's not going to feel heard and seen at all. So you've got to check in with that person to make sure they're ready to move past it so that you can have a real conversation now.
And what happens in a neurophysiological sense is that when we experience something, let's say something stressful, like something that's difficult, hard, stressful, and emotion is activated in our body in response to that situation. If we don't move it through, in the absence of a compassionate witness, in the absence of someone to be in it with us, that emotion, that stress, that energy gets stuck in our body. And so what happens then is we keep getting more and more stuck in our bodies because we don't move it through. And that is where we end up with people with chronic pain, headaches, migraines, back pains. Pelvic pain is huge for men. Pelvic pain is where a lot of men will store their stress and trauma. And so we have these situations, and the difference between if I can be compassionately witnessed, right? If I can have someone who sits with me in it, I can move through it so quickly. It allows a person to be seen, like you said, to feel that someone cares. And compassion is empathy in action. It is not me sitting here feeling sorry for you. It is me going, yes, that was really hard. Yeah, that was a really tough situation. And I get why you're so frustrated and pissed off at Joe Schmo for what just happened. I get why you're so responsible. And and I use anger because it's not always sadness. It can be a lot of different things. And then once a person is seen, witnessed, and felt within it, then you really can move to action, empathy and action. Now we can get into, okay, what's the next best thing that we can do in this situation? How can we move forward in the most creative, compassionate, and courageous way? And people are no longer stuck in it. They can move through it, and you get them back to being productive, happy, high performing people again.